Yeah.
I like it.
So, yeah, do you want to just tell us a little bit about you, Ben, before we start, and then we can get on with the questions?
Yeah, cool. So I'm a co-owner of Benchmark Gym over in Stockport, and also a mindset coach. So work with people on kind of like their mentality towards kind of different aspects within life, goals, fitness goals, body shape goals, or anything kind of they want to go and achieve. Benchmark Gym itself has been open for 5 years. And again, it's the same, working with people on improving their fitness levels, body shape, mental health, well-being, etc. So very fitness orientated, but from my personal journey, a lot more kind of what to achieve. So yeah, that's a little small recap of.
Again.
You okay?
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Got you.
Right, can you hear us okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got you.
Right, perfect. Okay, so we'll just go through some questions then that a few people have sent across. So the first one, it says, would you recommend doing strength training on the same day as a hard running session?
So again, with a lot of these questions, I think I spoke to you, Sophie, about the philosophy and mentality I've got in terms of certain aspects. So everything that I speak about today isn't necessarily the correct way. It's just my opinion. I think that it will come down more specifically to the level of runner you are, and the level of programming you've been given. But if it's a hard running session, I would separate it away from the strength training. Either having a day rest in between or the next day. I think a big thing around training is nutrition. So if you're doing a lot of training, I think your nutrition needs to be on point. I think you need to be eating right and rest and recovery. So for myself, from a training perspective, I have limited rest days. I usually rest when I feel I need to rest, but it's because my nutrition's on point, and also I rest and recover correctly through the day. So it comes down to how you're looking after your body, basically. But in answer to the question, generally, I would say, yeah, separate them into different days. If your schedule's busy and you needed to put it on the same day, I'd look at upping your calories, getting better nutrition, or looking after your body, a lot of mobility work, a lot of soft tissue work, etc. Booking with Sophie for a massage.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so how many times a week would you say runners need to do S&C work?
I'd say this can vary, again, depending on what the runner's running for. Are you going for a specific event? Are you running for fun? Are you running to specific like programming challenges, etc.? I think that as a runner, whatever your specific sport is, that needs to be your main focus. Okay, so if you're a runner, running is your main focus. That's what you should do the majority of. So then the secondary background would be, okay, what's going to assist that? So then if your S&C is going to assist that, that's exactly what it does. What you've got to be careful of is that S&C doesn't override your performance. So if you start to do too much S&C, strength and conditioning training, and it starts to impact the times you're running, it starts to impact how you're feeling when you're running, might start to make you feel a little bit run down or causing injuries. You need to start to assess it a little bit more. Again, I keep going back to nutrition, but you get away with doing more S&C work if your calories are higher. So again, it's focus, and Sophie probably backed me up a little bit on this, and the amount of calories that Johnny eats, and a lot of the New Balance team eats. But if you're doing a lot of running, these guys, man, are slender in natural stance, but they need to consume calories to give them the energy to go off. So I'd say you're looking S&C work maybe 2 times a week. But again, it's all dependent on the programming itself, and also you need to address what the S&C is doing. Is the strength and conditioning working on specific injuries that you've had in the past, so to prevent that happening again? Is it to strengthen certain areas that's going to improve certain running aspects, maybe your stride length, just maybe your ability to run faster up hills, things like that? So from an S&C background as a coach, what I would look at is where is your weakness within running, where do you need to improve, and then build a program around that. But if you're looking just as a general perspective, I'd say 2 days of S&C work minimum a week would be a good starting base, depending on how much you're running. Because I know that a lot of runners have just got the mentality of run. And if you've got to give some space, if that makes sense. Stop me if I rattle too. Like Sophie knows I like to ramble. Please jump in if I keep on talking.
Okay, next one. They said, I have a weak core. Is there any exercises you recommend doing?
For core work, I think I would personally say to try and make it as functional core as possible. I think that a lot of the core work that Sophie does is, you can tell that that's based around running core specifics. I think that any movement where you're having to hold your body and then move through a range of motion or a range of movement even is better for runners, because again, I'm trying to touch a base of gauging an S&C aspect for running, but from my perspective, you're trying to hold yourself in a certain position whilst you run. Again, it comes down to running correctly through your stride and your body position, trying to stay relaxed, etc., whilst engaging the core and firing for your glutes and things like that. So when you talk about working your core, it's like, I wouldn't just look at what's a good core exercise. I'd look at what's a core exercise that can improve the area that I need to work on for my running. And I think that's where it could be good for you guys, that if people have questions, it's a case of like, well, instead of thinking should I get a stronger core, it's more thinking like, which aspects of my core would benefit my running. Have I got weak glutes? Yeah, well, glute work is going to be better than working your abdominals then. Do I struggle with lower back pain? Yeah, well, working my hip mobility would be better than like doing planks. Do you know what I mean? So it's, core work is so important, but I think it's more integral to know why you're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But again, what I'd recommend is, I'm bigging Sophie up massively today, but I'd recommend Sophie putting together some of the core routines she does, because when you stood in the gym coaching and she's doing some mental exercises on the floor, but they're all functional core based, and you can tell that that's from a running aspect or from an athletic aspect, that's the area to go down, rather than more of an aesthetic crunches, sit-ups, basic plank holds. I think the more functional you can keep it is going to benefit a runner.
Okay, awesome. So another person has asked, my hips and knees start aching after a long run. Would you say adding strength work into my training would make a difference?
Yeah, massively. I think a big thing to remember is that if you haven't had an impact injury to your knee, generally the pain in your knee isn't coming from the knee, it's coming from somewhere else. So it could be coming from a tight hip, a tight hamstring, tight hip flexors, could be coming from back issues, etc. So, and again, that's generally, there might be some issues within the knee from repetitive running, but as a general, from what I've seen, a lot of people will say I'm getting pain within the knee, and it's usually coming from maybe tight hips, or it's coming from tight hamstrings. So the benefit of strength training is developing muscle mass, which will support the joint. So you're talking your quadriceps and your hamstrings, your adductors and your adductors, so the muscles in the top 5 basically. But then also working an element of mobility around your hip and your ankle. So ankle mobility and hip mobility are massive as well, and strengthening your glutes. So the answer to the question is, yeah, strength training will start to take away pain from the knee, but it also incorporate mobility and soft tissue work as well. Mm-hmm. Which again, that's your S&C program. A true strength and conditioning program should be surrounded with strength training, an element of conditioning to build whatever system you're trying to build aerobically or anaerobically, but then also mobility and soft tissue work. And if you combine all of that with whatever running program you've got, you should see massive progressions.
And the correct trainers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the correct trainer, very true. Very true.
Okay, next one. So this person said can only fit S&C and once a week because you struggles to fit any more in? Do you think that's enough?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's being specific then to what will benefit her the most. Does that make sense? And that comes again back down to the reasons why you are doing S&C training. Okay. And I think a good example is when people used to come into your shop, Sophie, you used to do the what was it called for the training? Was it the tracking? You got them on the treadmill. Yeah. So to do that, you're starting to understand where the person needs to work on, so that then you can design a strength program to benefit their running ability, if that makes sense. So one S&C program a day a week would be fine if it's specific to that individual.
Okay.
So I think this is where giving advice in terms of where people can work on would be great, you know, programming wise.
Yeah.
So they can take that away. So like, what is a good S&C program for someone who wants to improve on a certain distance, or for someone who has weak glutes, or for someone who is struggling with knee pain, because it will all be slightly different, if that makes sense. But one a week is fine, 100%. It's just the productivity of the session. What are you getting out of the session? If you're going in and sitting in a commercial gym and just sitting on a machine and doing weights, I'd say the benefit's not there. I think if you're going in and being productive with the exercises specific for your improvement, then once a week is absolutely fine.
Okay, great. So the question is, are there any good strength exercises to make me a speedy runner?
Speedy runner. So when you say speedy runner, what distance are we talking?
They're not specific, to be honest, but I'm guessing potentially quite short, fast, maybe 5K. We'll go with 5K because I know it's quite a common distance. So
cool. So I'd say a lot of, if you want specific exercises, I'd say single leg work. So unilateral work is really good. So basically things like single leg squats, whether barbell or dumbbell. I think kettlebell swings are a great exercise, and also barbell glute bridges. Anything where a hip hinge exercise where strengthens your glutes, strengthens your posterior muscles, which a lot of runners neglect. And then the benefit of the single leg squat as well is your hip flexor, which is the muscle that kind of comes from the front, from the pelvis down into the leg, gets stretched so it gets lengthened. So it in turn is a mobility exercise as well. So I think unilateral work like single leg squats, whether dumbbell or barbell. I think glute work is a massive one for runners. And then also kind of any kind of lunges as well. I think things like barbell squats can be beneficial, but I think it's understanding what you're getting out of exercises like that. I think that without going too in depth, you've got kind of like slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. And when you start to work within different rep ranges, you start to strengthen either or. So if you're going for a longer distance, you'd think you want to go more endurance based in your reps, but you don't, because 20 reps on a squat, which is classed as endurance, isn't going to massively benefit you in terms of running. I think your aim of the strength training is to fire your fast twitch muscle fibers, which will strengthen the muscle in that movement, which then when you go into your running would give you just a stronger muscle in general.
Good. Go on. So they said, I'm worried about doing too much strength work and becoming heavier as a runner.
Food. Comes down to your calories, doesn't it? I think it's a big one for females as well when they come into a gym and it's like, I don't want to train with weights because I don't want to get bulky. And it's like, you're only going to get bulky if you eat food, if you eat a lot of food. So I think it's strength training is integral in all walks of life and for any sport. And I think if you go to the top end of any sport, whatever it may be, whether it's golf, whether it's running, whether it's football, whatever it may be, there will be strength and conditioning work built into their regime. I think where you run the risk of becoming too heavier is if you're eating if you're eating a lot of food. So if you start to increase your calories a lot, the muscle naturally grows, if that makes sense. So I think it's a big takeaway from this is to start to understand what you feed in your body, what you fuel in your body, how much you fuel in your body, and then start to incorporate that around it. And I think one way to get away from that would be, a good example of how to structure your diet would be this: higher calories on your strength training days, because it'll help your body recover. Higher calorie meals pre or post run, but then outside of that, drop the calories down. And just make sure you are monitoring your results, which is a massive thing. And that's something that I'm big as a coach. If you're in a routine of just going through the motions and you aren't measuring and you aren't monitoring, you've got no way to assess what's working or isn't. So for a lot of people, if they're in the routine of just kind of like, I don't know really if I'm improving, my time's around about the same, I'm doing a bit of an S&C program, but I'm not sure whether it's working or not. How are you measuring it? Do you know what I mean? What specifically are you measuring to show you that this is working? Well, I don't know. I'm just doing it. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, if you can zone in on how to measure it and what you're looking for, that will progress you as a runner, and you'll start to make massive strides forward.
Perfect. Just another one I was just thought of, because I know a lot of people, well, when the races are all back up and running, if they were to race on a Saturday, what would you say, when would be the last day to do any strength work before a race of a weekend?
It's a really tricky one, that, and I think that it would depend on the individual themselves and how used to they are to strength training. I think if I'm being realistic in who I'm speaking to here, I would say give it a week, so 7 days. I think do your last strength training, and then I'd start to deload and just focus on whatever percentage of running you're doing. So you might be going down to a certain percent of runs or effort rating within your running, and just specifically focus on that. That week that should then be revolved around recovery, rest, soft tissue work, etc. For performance on the day. I think that if you are at a higher level within running, you might be able to get away with going 4 or 5 days out and just lowering the volume, so doing lower sets and lower reps just to keep the muscles firing. Make sure adequate nutrition is involved, so that when you come to rest day, there might be a bigger output. But again, you might speak to some high-end runners and they disagree with that. They might say deload a couple of weeks before. So again, I think it comes down to how much strength training you're already doing, how used to it you are. But I think as a general answer, I'd say a week, 7 days, give your body enough time to recover. And again, out of this, what I'd say is you've got to focus on the aspect of what you're trying to do. And if you're a runner, running should be your main priority. The strength training and stuff around it is to support that, but you've got to understand what it's supporting. So what is the strength and conditioning doing it? Is it to fix a weakness? Is it to strengthen me up in a certain area? Is it to improve my speed? Is it to strengthen my muscles? Is it to avoid injury or prevent an injury? If that makes sense.
That does make sense, yeah.
Anything else you can think of?
I just thinking, so obviously you've mentioned nutrition. I think probably people are wondering, do they need to focus on like certain elements like protein? That's something people associate with gym work.
Yeah, I think protein is essential for recovery. I think for runners though, especially, carbohydrates is your big one. So I think your energy system is run off carbohydrates. So I think that you get a lot of runners that carb load before big races, maybe a few days before. But again, that's where you run the risk of, if you start to eat too much and you do the strength training, you're going to start to become heavier. And this goes back to what I was saying about monitoring your results, monitoring your weight, monitoring your times and your running. I would say protein is important, but I'd say for a runner, your carbohydrate sources, what you're eating is more, because again, I don't want to go too in depth and start to kind of confuse anyone, but insulin's a massive factor within rising blood sugar levels and recovery and hormones and things like that. So if you're eating rubbish foods that spike insulin, too soon before runs or too soon around the time, it can drop your energy levels whilst you're going, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think understanding nutrition is a big factor, not just the food sources, but the kind of the food amounts as well. But again, it goes down to what you're trying to get out of it. Someone that's going to run a marathon is going to want to intake a lot more calories than someone that's looking to push a 5K.
Yeah.
So I think if anyone can take anything away from what I'm trying to talk about from an S&C point of view, it would be write down your exact goal. Like, what do I want to get out of my running right now?
Yeah.
What's my specific focus? Is it improving the time in my 5K? Do I want to enter a half marathon or a marathon? Like, what's my specific focus? Do I want to improve my stride length? Do I want to get over this injury that keeps reoccurring every time I run, which can be a goal? That's a good goal to use. And I think Sophie's back up that from a knee problem, and now she's back running. Find what your goal is, and then work your program around that. Because there's so many programs out there, there's so much nutrition stuff out there. But if you aren't making it specific to you as an individual in your goal, you're just using a generic program that potentially won't take you as far as you can get it. And I think that, guys, if running Bear's like a well-known shop, and I think that if you guys can give information out on this, I think a lot of people would see massive benefits in terms of improvements in the running and performance as well. And I think Sophie made a good comment there about trainers. The amount of people at Benchmark that Sophie's worked with to change the trainers who have improved the running times and seeing less injuries or a reduction in injuries has been phenomenal. So that's a massive point as well. So I think that's where you guys as a shop kind of stand out. But I think, takeaway points is understand what your goal is, what you're trying to get out of running at this minute in time, and then tailor your programming towards that and your nutrition towards that as well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I just have one more question. Is that all right? Sorry. I think a lot of people find gyms quite intimidating, especially when they first go. Have you got any suggestions for helping with that for that first few times they go?
Yeah, I think it's a tough environment to go into a gym sometimes. I think that I think the biggest thing to do and it is to find a coach that you can work with. And the reason being is that if you go in with a program and you go in with someone who's coaching you in terms of what to do, and that doesn't need to be someone there with you, it can be an online coach, it gives you more confidence when you go in. I think that this goes back to what I was saying before. A lot of people kind of go to a gym, like a commercial gym, for example, and they'll sit on a leg extension machine and they'll do 3 sets of 12. They'll sit in a hamstring curl machine and do 3 sets of 12, and they'll do a leg press for 3 sets of 12. And the benefit of that is so minimal compared to how productive it could be if they went to someone who knew what they were doing and said, no, do this exercise. And I think I see a lot of people, and especially with Benchmark, it's like as soon as people start to understand and learn an exercise and how to do it properly, the benefits of it, they actually become more confident within themselves. So when they go into the gym, they're not going in thinking, everyone's looking at me because I don't know what I'm doing. They go in actually thinking, I do know what I'm doing. I'm actually quite confident with this. I'm in my zone, and you crack on with it. And that starts to bring out a confidence in you that allows you to go and work your program and take it away. And the last thing I'll note on that is, for a lot of S&C for runners, you can do a lot of it from home with basic equipment like single leg squats and things like that. You don't need a massive load, especially if you're just beginning into it. So single leg squats, you could just load with a 10 to 12k dumbbell or kettlebell. Kettlebell swings you could work, or single leg deadlifts, so you could work with a lighter weight. So especially with the minute with gym short, there's a lot of S&C strength and conditioning programs that you could do from home. Again, it comes down to 2 things I'd say is, number 1, research your coach, make sure they know what they're talking about, specific for your goal. And number 2, understand what you want out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't just go and buy into something when you've not really thought about, well, this is what I want to achieve. Again, it's about sitting down and thinking, what do I want right now out of my running? And when you understand what that is, go for it. And again, last thing I'll say, Sophie knows I like to ramble, but I know a lot of runners, and all they do is run. all they do is run. It's just this mentality of running. And I think they do a lot of it because just it helps ahead. It's a form of meditation for a lot of people. It's like, just going to go out for a run, I'm going to go out for a run, I'm going to go out for a run, get millions of miles in, which is really good. But then they start to become injured. And that's when you start to talk about these knees injuries and tight hips and all these things as well. If they start to become a bit more specific in terms of, I'm going to run a lot, but I'm going to aim for things, they start to see a progression with what they're going towards. And I think that's it. If you can start to see what you're working towards, it all makes a hell of a lot more sense than just running for the sake of it.
Perfect. Anything else?
No, that's it for me.
Anything else you need to think covered everything?
I think that anyone watching this, if they're thinking like, well, like, where do we go? What are my next steps? I'm not a running coach, don't worry. But I think you've got the power of Running Bear, and especially Sophie, that have got the knowledge that I've just talked about there. Like when I'm talking about understanding a goal for running and programming that and programming S&C and thinking about nutrition, you guys know everything I'm talking about there. So if people take anything from this call, it's like when they go away and think, right, what do I want to improve on? Right, now I know what it is. How do we go about that? Reach out to the Running Bear shop, man. Reach out to you guys, because I think you guys have got the information that I've been talking about there to go in and deliver it to them.
Yeah, definitely. And within the running club as well, like we're always on hand to answer any questions on the Facebook page as well. So yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
Perfect.
Cool.
Right,
thank you very much.
No, thanks for having me on, guys. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Take
See you
care.
later.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.